People gathered Monday to pay respects to those lost in what is considered one of the worst acts of racial violence in American history. 100 years ago, Tulsa, Oklahoma's Greenwood district, at the time one of the country's most prosperous black communities, was burned to the ground. A century later, hundreds gathered in Tulsa to continue the call for reconciliation and justice for black Americans. Joined by living survivors of the massacre, people poured soil into jars to honor the victims whose names are lost to history and to echo the call for action on racial equality.
We will say to America that we too are America. We too are Americans. We too deserve. We too should be memorialized. We too should be repaired, restored. And there is, as the church said yesterday, no reconciliation without justice. I kneel.
Monday's memorial was just one of several held to mark the anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre. Parishioners sang throughout a church service while hundreds marched through the streets with 3 living survivors of the 1921 violence led by a horse-drawn carriage. For some, the march had meaning beyond just remembering the massacre.
For me, this is another step towards inquest towards justice. This is not an event for me, this is a freedom march. But make no mistake about it, we have a very clear message that until justice is done, we have work to do.
On May 31st, 1921, a mob of white Tulsans gathered outside a courthouse after a black teen had been accused of assaulting a white woman in an elevator. They demanded the boy be turned over to them, but the sheriff refused. A group of black men, some of them veterans, showed up to help guard the teen amid fears he could be lynched by the mob. Tensions rose as the armed groups grew in size, and around 10 p.m. there was an exchange of gunfire between the two groups, kicking off what a sheriff's report described as all hell breaking loose. In the early morning hours of June 1st, Greenwood's homes, churches, and numerous buildings were looted and burned by a white mob, armed with guns and firebombs and using airplanes as well. Human Rights Watch estimates up to 300 people died in the massacre and about 8,000 were displaced. The wanton destruction of the predominantly black neighborhood has led to calls for reparations for black Tulsans, which continue to this day. Reverend Robert Turner has held weekly marches for almost 3 years to City Hall demanding justice.
I've been going down to City Hall since September the 12th, 2018, and I've been an advocate for reparations all my life. But once I came to Vernon as the pastor here in 2017 and learned about the history of this church and her members and what happened to them and to this place in 1921, and coming here on a daily basis, I was moved in my soul to take some direct action, and that's what I do, and that's what I have done, and that's what I will continue to do until justice is done.
107-year-old Viola Fletcher and 2 other survivors testified before lawmakers 2 weeks ago to push for justice.
I will never forget the violence of the white mob when we left our home. I still see black businesses being burned. I still hear airplanes flying overhead. I hear the screams. I have lived through the massacre every day. I am a 107-year-old and have never seen justice. I pray that one day I will.
I survived the 1921 Tulsa race massacre, and I have survived 100 years of painful memories and losses. By the grace of God, I am still here. I have survived. I have survived to tell this story. I believe that I am still here to share it with you.
U.S. President Joe Biden will travel to Tulsa on Tuesday in honor of the 100th anniversary, but on Monday he proclaimed May 31st as a day of remembrance and called on Americans to commemorate those who died and celebrate the bravery and resilience of the survivors. 100 years later, the painful legacy of one of America's worst acts of race-based violence continues to shape conversations on racial justice, equality, and reconciliation. Sean Preble, Global News.